Hello out there, weird wide Webbians, and thank you for tuning in to part 2 of our special vampire episode here on the Weird Wide Web podcast. Today is no frills, real short intro. I'm going to set right into our vampire stories because, wow, I've barely got time for everything I have for you, and it's all so amazing. This episode blew up. It blew up, guys, when I mentioned vampires. Y'all love vampires. It's crazy. And, some of you guys I was able to work with and some I wasn't, just based on word count, because I can only fit so much into these episodes. And wow, I have got 5 more stories for you guys today. We need to get right into reading these stories, but real quick, I do want to say, stick around till the end of the episode, and I will reward you with a treat. And that treat is author Kasey Hill. And she is a treat, guys, because she is extra, and she is special, and I guess she's sweet. Yeah, she's pretty sweet. Sometimes. We love her, and I can't wait to chat with her about vampires. So make sure to stick around, guys. But for now, let's get this vampire party started. The Last Temptation by Suzie Lockhart.
Boss man, don't worry. They will come.
The familiar's voice held a pleading note while trying desperately to reassure his master. Victor patted the small man's head as though he were nothing more than a pet, then dragged long fingernails through his thinning hair, lightly scratching the scalp. A shudder ran through the man's round little body.
I sincerely hope so, Anthony.
The scent of human flesh and blood wafted through the air. Victor inhaled deeply, drinking in the warmth pulsating through the night. His mouth watered as he imagined himself drinking the delicious crimson liquid. He wondered what tasty morsel the others were bringing him tonight. During the several hundred years he'd been a vampire, Victor had found himself gradually developing a taste for younger and younger victims. The youthful blood seemed filled with an undeniable vitality, invigorating him and causing him to crave more.
I shall be waiting inside.
Victor dismissed the familiar as he entered his private quarters. The vampires disguised themselves as a traveling circus, moving from city to city. Victor always stayed in his tent. His appearance was somewhat odd, thus he did not blend well, so he sent the newer ones to do his bidding. Vampires aged slowly, but Victor had been undead since the time of the Black Plague. It had ravaged his family centuries ago. Watching them die one by one had been devastating. True torment was watching his beautiful 5-year-old daughter endure unspeakable agony. Victor had just turned 50 when Rachel entered the world. It had been a difficult pregnancy for his 46-year-old wife, but the child had brought them great joy. Victor sighed, still yearning for his family.
Boss man?
Anthony called out from outside the vampire's tent, seeking permission to come inside.
Enter,
Victor commanded. The small man obeyed, stepping in. His face was animated as he informed his master.
We have something special tonight. Yes, very special indeed.
His expression was eager as he added,
A young girl.
Victor mused.
Bring her.
The vampire watched in anticipation as Anthony reached outside. The child stood before him, unafraid. Victor's eyes widened at the sight of her porcelain skin, the dark brown curls, the big blue eyes.
Are you going to take me to my daddy?
She asked. Victor's voice was consumed with unbridled rage.
Take her home. See that not a hair on her head is harmed.
The familiar trembled from fear that he had angered his master.
Do you understand?
Victor admonished, his fangs protruding menacingly.
Okay, boss man. Sorry.
He stammered, cowering away as he left with the girl. Victor was shaking from head to toe as he walked slowly to an ancient trunk holding his belongings. He gently slipped out the delicate painting. Surely this must be some sort of punishment for his vile deeds, for the young girl brought before him tonight had appeared as an exact duplicate of his long-dead daughter. Exciter by Macek III. The most disturbing and horrifying thing I ever saw when I was human was in, of all places, a pet store. It was feeding time in the reptile section. The staff fed live mice to the snakes. I saw them slowly pulling down twitching lumps through their tubular bodies as they digested their living meals. That wasn't the disturbing part. What horrified me was one snake who wasn't ready to dine yet. Rather, it was the mouse in its tank, staring through the glass with eyes wider than any I'd ever seen, its sides pumping with terrified breath as the much larger snake slowly uncoiled itself to finally slither over and lead the wide-eyed, slack-jawed mouse to its eternal darkness. I never forgot the look on that mouse's face, the look of pure terror as the snake behind it bided its time, knowing there was no means of escape, no way for that mouse to save itself. The mouse was living meat. I kept that image in my human head for decades, remembering the look of fear, certainty of death, hopelessness, and prolonged defeat. It disturbed me when I was a human. Now, I am no longer human. Now I live for that look on the faces of my prey. I am now the snake in a world filled with frightened mice, without hope of escape from their final captivity. Once I catch someone and they know they are done for, that same expression graces their faces. Horror, terror, pain, hopelessness, defeat. I love that look. I had that expression on my face once, the day I became a vampire. But since then, I drink my way through humanity at any speed I deem desirable. My Dionysian debauchery knows only the limits of my own interest. Immortality without immorality bores me, and I hate being bored. Sometimes I awaken in a room filled with the torn bodies of my kill from the night before, covered in the blood I crave. Often I stage sadistic orgies of destruction, fucking, then sucking my way through my prey as they show me that same face of horrified defeat before I make them my living meals. One night I am particularly proud of. I accepted an invitation to a fraternity party, showed up just after sunset, and brought some of my finest wines from my collection. I got every airheaded ditzy sorority girl and dipshit moronic fraternity brother so loaded I could do anything I wanted. So, I made each of them into vampires one at a time throughout the night. The next morning, each of them awoke, hungover and sore. I pretended to feel the same, and we all exchanged stories about how incredibly fucked up we had gotten the night before. After an hour of complaining, someone suggested we go to breakfast, which everyone agreed to. Everyone was famished. They just didn't know what they were hungry for. It was around 11 a.m. The sun was almost at its apex. The crowd stumbled out, unshowered, ungroomed, and unknowingly undead, into the sunlight, where each of them exploded into fire and ash, then settled as dead dust on the wind. Those still inside were horrified and ran out to help their departed brethren, only to meet the same fate. It continued happening until every party-goer was dust, and I was rolling on the floor, clutching my belly, laughing my fucking ass off. None of those assholes would have invited the human me to their parties. Why should the vampire me honor them with my presence any further than it entertains me to do so? Vampirism converted me into something seductive, beautiful, puissant, terrifying. Seduction, it helps us survive. Our prey comes to us. They all get the same look on their forlorn faces. But of all the things I became with vampirism, terrifying is the aspect I covet most, and for all the joy I get preying upon the living in the most creatively terrifying ways, the pleasure I love the most is the delight of sampling every varied flavor of blood. Every taste is different. There are many different flavors of sustenance. No two humans or animals taste the same. Every piquancy depends on genetics, physical makeup, condition, and diet. I have tasted many varieties of prey blood. Vegetarians taste different from carnivores. Drug users taste different from drinkers, who taste different from teetotalers. The main factor in the enhancement of blood sakura savor is emotional state. The happy taste different from the depressed. The exhilarated taste different from the bored. My favorite, you can guess, is the taste of the terrified. The expression in their faces is only a hint of how much more delectable their blood will taste. Now I can smell on the skin and sweat of my prey all the hints of flavor that I will enjoy once I sink my incisors into their veins and arteries to drink from them. Once, a cabal of wealthy vampires invited me to their estate to sample their most precious projects. The vampiric culinary experts infected their human slaves with various bacteria, creating pustules and abscesses on their all-too-human skin. Then, the vampire masters and their party guests drank heartily from the pus sacs, tasting the fluids heated by the fever and the way they merged on the palate and tickled the tongue together, sometimes with blood, sometimes with plasma, sometimes with pus and liquefied carrion, was enchanting. Slaves are delicious, but I prefer the hunt. I favor the fear and terror as opposed to milking willing human cattle. Therefore, my blood quest continued around the world. I sampled every taste I could imagine, following the smells and delighting in the succulence of humans, animals, and even plants with the finest liquid nutrients. By this year, I was certain that my undead decades had allowed me to smell and taste everything available. Although I had my favorites, much as I had my preferred foods as a hapless human, I slowly began to tire of the same flavors. I wanted something new, fresh, rich, and, dare I say, toothsome. No blood or combination of bloods and fluids managed to surprise me. No smell grabbed me and held me as they had during my luscious lifetimes of delicious discovery. Not until I met her. Her name, appropriately, was Ruby. I had never smelled anything like her. She was an up-and-coming actress, making her name in movies and TV, but found herself typecast in sex kitten roles. I could fix that for her. I could end her entire auditioning ordeal. I would. The smell of her intoxicated me, sealing her fate. As she walked by that foggy Hollywood night, I felt that I had been ushered into a new restaurant on a peculiar planet in a reality I had never visited. Her scent was beyond enticing. Like smelling new recipes for new meats, I simply wanted to sniff her, enjoying the appetizing aromas for as long as she needed to marinate. I could only fathom how she would smell when terrified. How could I wait longer? I forced myself to wait. I followed her, smelling her, watching her, licking my fangs, hardening in anticipation. I met her on the street and asked her to buy a drink. She was beautiful, blonde, busty, and big-eyed, displaying ice blue pupils with no visible blood vessels. Not yet. She stared into my seductive eyes and readily agreed. I convinced her to let me into her home. I was overwhelmed by her smell there. Where had she been my entire unlife? I almost hesitated to proceed, not wanting to be let down or ruin the anticipation, which was greater than any victim I had tasted. As my fangs lengthened and twitched in excitement of this fabled meal, I forced myself to wait. There was one thing missing: fear. I needed Ruby to feel true fear, far beyond anything she had experienced before. I needed to season her blood with terror. As she opened a second wine bottle, I revealed all the terrible wonder I had become through vampirism, and she was immediately awed by me. Then, fear showed on her face. Not quite the terror, shock, and panic of a trapped mouse in a snake tank, but enough of an appetizer for what was to come. She screamed and ran, and her bouquet deluged me. She sprinted through her charming California neighborhood, dodging palm trees and pedestrians as she fled. I calmly followed her, as I might relaxedly follow a waiter to a prime table in a fine eatery. Why hurry? With each terrified step, Ruby's blood and flesh seasoned itself in delectable distress. Ruby ran to her movie studio, and the guard let her in. I floated over the railing and slashed the guard's throat with my claws before closing the distance with her. My final girl dove into an unlocked soundstage and slammed the door. I burst through it, sending metal and wood flying after her. Now, the emotionally charged blood in her veins was too enticing to further ignore. I needed to taste her. She tripped and fell before me, then began pushing her way backwards. Then I was upon her. Even her delicious discomposure smelled unique from any I had smelled. I shook as I prepared to taste and consume her. I hoped to make it last instead of sucking every blood cell from her body in minutes like my appetite wanted me to. She screamed once more as I sunk my fangs into her jugular. With the first squirt of her juices, I was in ecstasy. I had never tasted anything remotely like Ruby. Nothing tasted so wonderful. I fell backwards from her, swallowing the mouthful of bodily fluid I had tasted, eyes wide, consciousness conquered, heart racing for the first time since my death. I felt inebriated. The flavors of Ruby's blood came to me in crashing waves, each with a peculiar combination of tastes that floored me. Every delicious flavor I had experienced in life and in death washed over me, stoning me until I was higher than I had ever been. There were new tastes, too, as unique as her smell, flavors I had never thought possible. It was like tasting color, tasting sound, tasting life itself. "What are you?" I gasped in appreciative awe as my brain rushed to process everything that overcame me, body, mind, and spirit. Then I saw her blood was not red like I expected. It was silver, like mercury. I could have seen my reflection in it, had there been enough of it. I rubbed my lips and looked at my fingers, seeing that same inhuman quicksilver ichor. I licked them, and my eyes rolled back in their sockets at the taste. I needed more. Whatever Ruby was, she had the most perfectly piquant blood I had ever sampled. I wondered if I might take a page from the aristocratic vampires, keeping Ruby alive as my pet human cow that I could milk for her sanguinary quicksilver. Could I resist drinking all of her before she died? I was ready to take my next bite from her throat or wrist, perhaps from her femoral artery, adding sexual bliss to the experience for both of us. When my eyes cleared, I did not see Ruby lying on the floor in pain. Instead, she was relaxed, smirking at me. "I take it my blood didn't disappoint you," she chuckled. "What?" "You deserved at least a mouthful after that chase. Besides, your breed of vampire is so much more delicious when you're inebriated by bloodlust." She shrugged and continued smiling at me sexily. "My breed?" I asked, leaning forward. "We have many breeds," she laughed. "Yours is much more naive than most, but your ignorance makes you no less yummy." "Is this some kind of a stupid fucking joke?" I scoffed. "Are you trying to show me bravado in the hopes I'll leave you alone?" "Oh no, Eli," Ruby mocked, surprising me with my human name. "You're not going anywhere, little boy." "You're going to be fun to devour," I laughed. "You think so?" she giggled. "Here, have your last taste." She collected the blood that had flowed from her throat and flung it at me, revealing her unblemished, fully healed flesh. I dove, unable to resist, and caught the droplets on my tongue before I lunged at her to drink directly from the source. Ruby was ready. She caught me and held me against her firm breasts, her chest heaving in anticipation, as mine had. "There you are," she sighed, smelling me deeply. "You're just about ripe now." Then I watched her jaw unhinge and her mouth open far too wide. Was I so drunk on her blood I was hallucinating? Then I saw what was in her mouth. Fangs up top, fangs down below, and a tongue that extended to two sharpened points, resembling a snake's tongue, though sharp enough to pierce my flesh. And she did. Both sets of teeth and the forked tongue sank into my throat, cutting more painfully than any agony I had felt since leaving behind my humanity. I gasped, trying to scream, but the only sound I could hear was the noise of her perfectly intact throat. Glug, 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 it went. Ruby then released me and let me fall excruciatingly to the floor. "Why?" I croaked, gazing at her with saucers for eyes. "Because I'm hungry, Eli," she giggled. "You must understand that." "No," I gasped painfully. "If you're powerful enough to do this to me, why did you run from me?" Ruby laughed, saying, "I was being kind. I gave you the choice. You chose death." "What are you?" I struggled to demand as Ruby prepared for another love bite. "What I am," she said gleefully, "is the last thing you'll ever see. There are many breeds of vampire. Some even feed on other vampires." "Why?" I whispered, shaking. "Every soul has its own flavor, like every blood has its own taste. I have grown to love the souls of other vampires, and you smell delicious." "Mercy," I groaned. Ruby laughed uproariously. "Mercy? No, eternal hell for your delectable soul. You should never have challenged a succubus," I finished for her, realizing my face was twisted into the horrified look I once loved my prey to show me. With that, Ruby laughed again and drank more from me. My vampiric blood was not all she took. My soul sucked into Ruby for pitch-dark eternal agony, making the face of terror and defeat within the most delicious executioner anyone ever had the misfortune to hunt. Forever was I her captive mouse. Forever was she my devourer. Siddhartha by Josh Darling. When the prince was born, the kingdom rejoiced that the King Suddhodana the Conqueror had an heir. The people were so overjoyed, they spread rumors about the child's birth. They said he was born able to walk, that lotuses blossomed in his footprints. When the child was still suckling, King Suddhodana called forth a soothsayer. The old man had gifted Suddhodana's father with the prediction of his conquests. In the nursery, the king lifted the child from his cradle. The soothsayer backed away. "Why do you retreat?" the king said. The soothsayer's face grew serious. He asked, "Do you want to know this child's future? I cannot lie, and I love my life, so I ask this of all kings before telling them the path of their children. I asked your father this, and his father as well. Surely his future is greatness. Promise me, no matter the future, you will not punish me for it. Speak the words." "I promise, no harm shall come to you by my hands." "Let me hold the prince." The father handed his son to the old man. The old man held the baby. He synced his breathing with the child's. The child's soft brown eyes studied the man. His senses cut through the incense and patchouli of the nursery to the scent of freshly born human. The old man closed his eyes, embracing the prince. He felt for the child. He felt for the world that would break under the weight of the prince's violent oppression, or be elevated by his compassion. "The prince has no future," the old man said. The king drew his sword. "That is not acceptable. He will live a long life. You dare not repeat yourself, or I will cut out your tongue and feed it to you." "If that is your wish, my king, so be it. But first, know what I have seen. His path is unlike any man's I have ever seen before. It divides." The king lowered his weapon. "Speak and choose your words with care. There are two paths your child's life might take. You will guide your son to be a savior or a monster. This child is different from all others. This child will conquer the world, or he will redeem it. My child is a conqueror, to be a king 100 times greater than myself. How do I point him down that path?" "My king, it is what's in your heart that will point your child to his future. But heed this warning. It is a dead woman that shall guide him down the path of Redeemer. It is the path of pleasures that will guide your child to conquer the world." The old man handed the child back to the king. The soothsayer left the castle and was never seen again. As the prince grew to be a young man, his father surrounded his son with every kind of entertainment and hedonistic distraction imaginable, from circus performers to musicians to concubines. Every moment was filled with games, spectacle, or servants for his desires. While walking along the parapets, the prince heard a sound new to him. It came from the village surrounding the castle. The prince ran to his chambers, traded clothes with a servant, and left the safety of his home. Navigating the streets, he closed in on the strange sound. Near the center of the village, dozens of peasants loitered outside a house. The prince asked one of the villagers, "What are all these people doing here? Why do they make that sound?" The villager looked at the prince as if he were mad. "The grandmother of this clan has died. These people are mourning her." "Mourning?" the prince said. "They are crying for their beloved dead." Not understanding, the prince entered the house. The corpse of an old woman rested in her bed. The prince approached. The prince was not ignorant enough to assume the old woman was sleeping, but he didn't fully understand. "Why is this woman like this? Why do your eyes water? Why do you make such a terrible sound?" And angry mourner responded, "Our grandmother is dead. We cry for our loss." "Dead?" the prince said. "It is the fate of all things." After returning to the palace, the prince confronted his father. "In the village I saw a dead woman. Why has this been kept from me?" Dearest child, I never wanted you to know suffering. Father, will you die? Everything dies, even me, even you. The prince soaked his face with his tears of future mourning. That was the first time the prince wept. For weeks, the prince stayed in his room. He neglected his concubines. He refused audience to dancers and performers. He starved himself, drinking only water from a clay cup. He stopped bathing and forbade his groomers to comb his nodding hair. The prince waned, contemplating the death of his loved ones and his own. One evening, he watched the moon rise over distant mountains, and a soft voice spoke from within his room. My prince, I'm not taking visitors, but my prince, I'm your new concubine. I have grown tired of the flesh of men and women. If I wanted to lay with someone, I would call for them. As the prince finished speaking, he laid eyes upon her. She made his breath quicken. He'd seen so many women in his life, he'd forgotten some women are special. This woman froze his thinking and stole his words. I am not here to pleasure you with my body. No, your father wants you to return to a life of pleasures, but he knows you've exhausted all of them. All of the pleasures but one, the pleasure I have to offer, the pleasure of blood. People's suffering never brings me joy. It will. The woman closed the distance between them with a speed that made the air whoosh past the prince in a soft, cool wave. Her skin was a soft light brown but seemed like a translucent cover for the graying muscles underneath. Your father told me I am to occupy you with forbidden desires, that I am to make you a conqueror of this world. I told him I will show his son such great delights, he'll subjugate the world for them. The prince reached out to touch the woman. She moved away from him. You flinch from my touch? I am not yours for sex. I am a prince. I do as I please. The woman grabbed him. You bore me, and I do as I please. She opened her silk robe, sliced her breasts with a clawed finger, and forced the prince's mouth to her bleeding nipple. He resisted, but the woman was stronger than any man he'd met. She forced his head to her cold, soft flesh. He pressed his lips shut, not in disgust but in defiance. He was a prince, and concubines never gave him orders. With his head locked tight in her hands, he exhaled against her flesh. Struggling, the smallest amount of blood worked between his lips. The taste was floral and infinite. An explosion of incense and images from the past and the future rolled behind his eyes and were instantly forgotten. The knowledge there and gone like a phantom touch. He knew everything in that moment. For the first time in his life, the prince knew a feeling he'd never known. Pure love. Then its absence. Then the thirst for its return. He had never known starving. He had never known pain. It had been moments since the flavor of her blood dissipated in his mouth. The woman clutched his body so tight, his shortness of breath distracted him from caring that they were floating off the ground. More, I want more now, the prince said. There is more I have to show you, my prince. He didn't listen. He bit her. Her skin did not break. My prince, it is now my turn. Grabbing his hair, she pulled his head to the side. The shock of her bite sprinted from his neck to his toes. In the humid summer night air, he felt frigid. His breath was thin. The sensation was like climbing a forever snow-capped mountain. He felt sleepy in her arms, his body limp. The universe was cast across the night sky. A great poet once said, when death comes, it's like the arms of a dark octopus, swirling in the outside of one's vision. He saw this blackness twisting in the borders of his vision. He was dying. She was killing him. There was no fighting her. This would be the end of his life. As with every animal whose death is progressive, He became aware of his body, of his heartbeat and breathing slowing, of the tightness of her grasp around his chest, of how horrible it would be for his father to know his son has died. "My prince, you must taste my blood again." She put her wrist to his mouth. Tasting her, he heard distant elephants trumpeting, monkeys fucking, dogs fighting over the fly-infested carcass of a beggar. The sound of maggots chewing the man's insides penetrated the palace walls. The rush hit like a crushing ocean wave. Dropping the prince to the floor, the woman drifted down to the marble. An instinct overtook the prince, like knowing how to eat or the act of sex. He ran at an instantaneous speed to his harem's chamber. The first concubine he encountered smelled of poppies and gardenia, like the woman's blood. He'd know the sexual pleasure of biting and being bitten by a lover. He wanted to bite her, and more. Grabbing the young woman, he chomped into her neck. She shrieked. The prince had played rough sex games with her, but nothing like this. The concubine did not expect to have her neck torn open. The voices of frightened sex slaves spoke as he nourished himself. He let go of the concubine, empty. She slipped out of his hands. He grabbed another one and drank before her body hit the white stone floor. Staining the hallways red, the prince killed every person in the palace. Outside the king's chambers, he killed the guards and consumed all they had to offer. About to open the door, the woman grabbed his wrist. The oil lamps lining the walls had the brightness of the noontime sun. Her face radiated a feeling like deep spring water on a hot day. I wanted to see something so sad I could finally die. I am rethinking this. Once you are bitten, the way I bit you, and the way I was once bitten, you become immortal. Only fire or sunlight can kill us. Both are painful, but so is living wanting to kill. I thought I wanted to see something truly awful, so I could take the wrath of the flames or stand before the sunrise. Truly awful? I have killed everyone in this castle. Does that not count as truly awful? Not yet. Who dares interrupt? He grabbed the queen, pulling open the door. Slicing into her, his teeth found chunks of her tissue. Swallowing the woman's flesh, he wanted more, and tore into her, screaming and flailing with abandon. The holes in her leaked deliciousness. His wide tongue pressing her skin guided her flavor into his mouth. "Son," the king said. The prince paused. His mother, dying, sobbed in his grasp. He dropped her. "Father, forgive me. I've killed everyone in the palace. All of my concubines, slaves, servants, the dancers, the musicians, the acrobats, all of the staff, all the guards. By gods, everyone." The king smiled. "Thank the gods. The prophecy is coming true. I worried you'd become a holy man when you saw the dead woman, so I found a new pleasure for you. To guide you back to the path I've always wanted for you." "But I've killed Mother." "That is the path of the warrior, the path of the destroyer, the path of a leader. A soothsayer once told me, you'd be the conqueror of the world or its redeemer. Redeemers are no good to kings." "But I've killed so many people. There's so much blood on my hands. I'm a monster. How could you want this?" "You can only conquer the world if you have a well desire within you." Tears of blood bulged along the bottom of the prince's eyelashes. The prince grabbed his stomach, his insides consumed by a cold fire that burned and devoured his guts. Lunging for his father, he ripped the king's windpipe out. A gurgling noise flowed between the prince's mouth and the hole. The flow wasn't enough. It wasn't right. None of what he was doing was right. He loved his father. Releasing the king, the prince witnessed the end result of his actions. His father, broken and twitching on the cool marble tiles at his feet. The high of satiated desires fused with the guilt of his actions. Thank you. You've made me see life as repugnant, and now I can do this. The woman blew out one of the wall lamps. She lifted it above her head and spilled the oil over herself. The first truth of life is pain, and forever life is forever pain. There is the pain of physical suffering, the pain of wanting, the pain of boredom, the pain of poverty, the pain of a broken heart, the pain of inadequacy. You have shown me something awful, something sad. When first turned, the thirst is terrible. I tell you that as a warning because you will know loneliness, and you will create companions. They will kill the same way you did tonight. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm so very sorry. Grabbing another oil lamp, the woman burst into flames. She ran, trying to beat the flames disintegrating her. The fire spread from her body to the tapestries and walls of the palace. The prince fled his home. In the chilled night air, he thought about the last hours. He'd blink and see his mother's corpse. Blinking, he'd see the wound in his father's neck. Blinking, he'd see the woman burning, spreading fire through the home filled with the bodies of every person he'd ever known, cared for, or loved. The woman's words were true. He had an illusionary existence, but now he'd learned a truth about life. It was the first thing in his life he knew to be real. To live is to feel pain. A truth so indisputable, it finds nobility. Warmed by the incineration of his home, the Prince Siddhartha knew what he must do. He would conquer the world, drink it dry, and share the first noble truth he'd discovered. It Came from the Trailer Park by Errol Swaim. Two men shined flashlights into what looked like a freshly dug grave at the back of an old cemetery. Dirt had been piled up on 3 sides, and the rectangular hole was at least 6 feet deep. An old yellow and rusting backhoe was parked nearby. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, and a soft orange glow shone through the gnarled trees surrounding the graves. The 2 lights darted around the area until the sun was bright enough to see better, then winked out as they were shut off. At first, nothing seemed horribly wrong, but now with better light, the men could see steam coming off the metal of the machine's engine. Someone must have used it recently. That wasn't out of the ordinary. It meant there was probably a funeral later that day. Something like that could be explained, no big deal. What couldn't be explained, however, was the open coffin with a corpse dangling over the side that had a large chunk of flesh torn out of its neck. There were handprints and deep gouges in the dirt going up the other side of the hole, footprints that led away into the trees. "I called in as soon as I seen it, Sheriff. Told you something weren't right," said the first man. He reached inside a pocket on his faded blue overalls and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, pulled one out, and stuck it in his mouth. Then he offered the pack to the officer. He took one and shook his head in bewilderment. It looked like someone had dug up this grave, opened it, did something to the body, and climbed out and ran away. Hopefully this day didn't get any worse. "I'm not the sheriff, Junior. I've told you 1,000 times. I'm a deputy. Call me Officer or Deputy Clinton." He put the cigarette in his mouth and pulled a lighter out of his own pocket and lit it, sucking in a lungful of smoke and slowly exhaling it. He closed his eyes. The nicotine calmed his frayed nerves. He took another drag, exhaled, and opened his eyes. "So, what are we gonna do, Sheriff? Deputy? Junior asked. Deputy Clinton laughed. First of all, we aren't doing anything. I, on the other hand, am going to follow these tracks and see what I find. Dang, I figured since I found it, maybe I could go with you, Junior said dejectedly. That's not how it works, bud. You've been a big help, sure, but you need to go home. It could be dangerous. Someone or something dug up this grave and defiled a corpse. I'm sure they don't want to get caught, so they may be armed. Junior's head went down. He was just like a lot of the people around here. Uneducated, dressed like a hillbilly. Probably never been out of this county. Maybe even out of this town. Small town folk are like that. They've got nothing better to do, so they find excitement any way they can. Something like a grave being dug up is the most exciting thing that's ever happened to them. Deputy Clinton watched him turn around and start to walk away when a thought occurred to him. Chances are whoever did this, Junior knows him, and people around here tend to shy away from cops. Maybe someone who knows everyone could help ease the tension. That's another thing about small towns. Everyone knows everyone. And he was new here, so he didn't really know many people yet. Junior could come in handy. Wait, he said. I guess you can come. Just be quiet and do what I say. I may need your help. Yeah, okay, Junior said. He was trying to act nonchalant, but the wide grin gave his excitement away. This would more than likely be a story he would tell for the rest of his life to whoever would listen. Let's roll, the deputy said, and threw the rest of the cigarette down and stomped on it. Junior followed Deputy Clinton around the grave to the other side. They stopped to look around again. Whoever the gravedigger was had done it barefoot, and the mud made it easy to track the footprints that led away from the scene. They followed the footprints to the edge of the woods where the muddy prints had started to fade away. But there was a trail that went through, and he assumed that the culprit had followed it. He stopped again. Have you been down this trail, Junior? The deputy asked. Yeah, there's a trailer park back in there, the answer came. You know any of the people that live there? Sure do. I know everybody. Well, I wouldn't say no. I'm friends with a lot of the people, but some of them I don't hang with or anything, so I know people, but I don't know people too. Deputy Clinton laughed and patted him on the shoulder. You know, sometimes I have no idea what you were talking about, Junior, he said. And he kept walking, and upon entering the wooded area, he pushed a limb aside and felt something squish under his foot. Looking down, he saw a strange black liquid with chunks of some kind of meat in it. Flies danced around it, swooping down periodically to take a bite and fly back up into the air. He wrinkled his nose when the rancid smell hit, and continued on the trail, through the trees, and was soon standing in the gravel driveway of an old run-down trailer house. What was that black stuff? Junior asked as he walked up behind him. I don't know, but I have an idea, and that scares me. It kind of looked like chunks of flesh. There might be a wild animal around here or something. I'm guessing some sicko dug up that grave and did God knows what, and then maybe a stray dog or bear or something took a chunk out of that corpse. Better stay behind me, Deputy Clinton answered. Okay, but if it was an animal, wouldn't it have got stuck down there? Yeah, you're right. Now I don't know what to think. Do you want to turn back? Hell no. This is the best day of my life. They paused in the driveway while the deputy wiped his shoes off on the dirt. You know who lives here, Junior? Clinton asked. Yeah, man. That's where Kentucky Jeffries lives. He works at the tire shop in town, always yapping about getting third place in a stupid rodeo when he was younger. Has a giant belt buckle he wears that's almost as big as he is. He got third place, but only because there were only 3 people in the contest. He don't care though, thinks he's a big deal. Skinny little dude, full of crap. Nice guy, though. Kentucky Jeffries. That's a weird name. He's a weird guy. The deputy turned his attention to the trailer. It had a wooden wheelchair ramp leading up to a deck that was falling apart. The windows all had foil covering them. Several were broken, and the skirting around the bottom wasn't all there. Several cats were sitting on the deck that scattered when he approached and quickly disappeared under the trailer. He waded through grass that looked like it hadn't been mowed in weeks and walked up the ramp. Taking up most of the room on the deck was a riding lawnmower that had been taken apart and never fixed. Beer cans, fast food boxes, and mounds of ripped open bags of garbage littered the area. As they walked up the driveway, they both heard frantic shouting coming from inside, followed by the sound of things being thrown around and glass breaking. More shouting. They looked at each other. Deputy Clinton unclasped his revolver and clicked off the safety just in case. He knocked on the door and the noises instantly ceased. Moments later, a tall, thin man wearing a long blonde mullet answered the door. His eyes were bloodshot, and there were dark circles around them. There was blood crusting on his chin. His pants were dirty, and he was barefoot. His eyes opened wide when he saw the two men standing at his door, and licked his lips.
Thank the Lord you're here, officer. I need help. Something is wrong with me. I don't know what to do. I'm so hungry and thirsty, and I can't keep anything down.
He was speaking quickly, frantically. He licked his lips again. All right, calm down. Is your name Kentucky? Asked Deputy Clinton. And are you sick or something? Junior chimed in.
Yeah, I'm Kentucky, and no, well, I don't know, man. I was at this bar last night, and I met this lady. She was way out of my league. Must have been drunk because she took me in the bathroom and, started making out with me. She got me all worked up and went down my neck, and I was all excited. Thought I was getting a hickey, but no, she bit me. So I had my eyes closed, right? Because I can't believe this is happening, And when she bit into me, I freaked out and started screaming and hollering and swinging my arms around. I opened my eyes and bam, she's gone. I try to wrap my neck up with paper towels and go looking for her. But it's like she just disappeared. I can't find her anywhere. Then I went home and doctored myself up. I was real tired, so I went to sleep. Now I'm all messed up, and I don't know what to do, man.
Deputy Clinton raised a hand. Hold up. You're saying a woman bit your neck and just disappeared at a bar? I don't even see any wounds on your neck.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. I can't figure it out. I woke up real early this morning and it was all healed up. And ever since I've been thirsty and hungry, like I can't get enough to eat, can't get enough to drink. Only everything I swallow I throw up. My stomach hurts real bad. I almost can't stand it. I feel weird, man. I don't know what to do.
Look, I think I need to take you to a hospital first. Then I have some questions that we need answering about the cemetery. No, Kentucky said suddenly in a deep guttural voice. It was like he had changed into a different person, angry and defensive. The muscles in his arms tightened, and his fists balled up like he was about to punch someone. Deputy Clinton put his hand on his weapon and began to back up. Junior stood still, oblivious to any danger. Look, we don't want any trouble. I just need to know if you dug up that grave, the deputy said as he continued to back up. Kentucky wasn't listening. He was eyeing Junior and licked his lips again. Junior, back up. Get behind me, Deputy Clinton instructed. It was too late. He, or it, whatever it was, lunged at Junior, jumped on him, sunk his teeth into his neck, and ripped a chunk of flesh out. He spit it out, buried his face in the wound, and began to frantically drink the blood that was pouring out, slurping loudly. Kentucky moaned and threw its head back.
Finally, some relief,
he said, and put his mouth back to the wound. There was more moaning. The deputy pulled his weapon from the holster and aimed it while the slurping noises got louder and more urgent. It didn't matter, though. Junior's body convulsed and grew still. He was dead. Kentucky let go, and his body dropped and hit the deck with a dull thud. He licked some of the blood off his lips.
Ye fucking ha, bitch,
he exclaimed, smiling as he advanced toward the deputy.
I guess that must be what it was I needed. I tried to eat real food, but kept throwing it back up. I had to do something. I even ate raw ground beef. I kept trying new things. I dug up that grave and ate some of that body down there, but I threw that up too. Everything tasted like ash. Who knew that blood is where it's at? It's glorious, the nectar of the gods. I feel strong, invincible.
The gun suddenly fired, and the bullet plunged into Kentucky's neck and instantly pushed back out of the wound and dropped to the ground. Then the hole closed up. There was no blood, no trace of a wound. He snarled. It wasn't Kentucky Jeffries anymore. It was something else. Deputy Clinton saw 2 long fangs on either side of its mouth that weren't there before. Its nails were growing, and the legs and arms began to stretch. Jesus Christ, what are you? He asked while backing up down the ramp.
I don't know, man, but I feel good, real good, and I need more,
it said. You stay right there, all right? Deputy Clinton reached his hand up to click the button on his radio. The creature pounced.
Oh no, you don't,
it said, and pushed him to the ground, straddling him. Deputy Clinton tried to push the creature off, but it was too strong. It was like trying to knock over a stone wall. He looked up to see the creature above him, hissing with its new fangs out, dripping blood onto his face.
You ain't calling no one,
it said, and sank its teeth into his neck. He screamed and instantly began to get woozy and lightheaded. His body grew weak, and he gave in to his fate. There was nothing he could do. The creature was too strong. The last thing he heard, as his life slowly ebbed away while it drank his blood, was his radio crackling and the voice on the other end.
Clinton, hello?
It said. Then, darkness. Starlight by Andrea Dean Van Scoyoc. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It was supposed to be a fun night out. Goofing on the clueless, BSing as many gullible people as we could find. But now, thanks to our stupidity, pride, whatever you want to call it, our lives were and are forever changed. It all started with a new club in town, a snotty, elite new goth club, and me and my pal, Gender, wanted in. The only problem was, we assumed it was 21 and older, so we started plotting ways to get in and ways to be the center of attention once we got in. My name is Orla, and I'm your ordinary 18-year-old goth girl, reading Poe, haunting cemeteries, and writing creepy poetry and short stories. But being so young comes with another set of problems, money being the biggest. I have a job, but it doesn't pay much, and I usually end up bumming or stealing money off of my mom. It's not like she notices anyway. She's usually high or out with some scumbag. Gender and I like to hang out at the mall, where we put on what we call scenarios, where we become people we aren't and probably never will be. It's funny to watch the vanillas, as we call them, freak out and scurry away from us as we act out some freaky act we've come up with. We've come up with some doozies, but the one we were going to do to sneak into the club and then ended up putting on once inside turned out to be a masterpiece. Or so we thought. Now, I wish we'd never played those stupid games, and I certainly wish I'd never heard of the Starlight Club. I'll never forget the day Gender and I passed the building as it was being renovated. It was apparent that it was going to be something very cool. The facade went from being boring cookie-cutter normal, like every other building downtown, to something out of an amazing Gothic novel. We came up with the perfect scenario to get into the club. Gender was going to be royalty, nothing too pretentious, just enough to garner attention, cruel, pompous, and authoritative, and I was going to be his property. I planned to be demure, acquiescing, and soft-spoken. It was going to be hilarious. We just knew it. It wasn't. If only. So, a few months later, when the club opened, Gender and I got dressed in our finest and stood in line. It was really weird, though. Hardly anyone was being allowed in. For every one person that got in, 5-10 more were denied. Of course, Gender and I were one of those turned away. As we walked home, we discussed the possible reasons for our not getting in. Was it what we wore? Nope. My makeup? Nope. Gender wants to be a makeup artist, and he's already really good. We never did figure it out, and had we been smart, which we obviously were not, we'd have given up and forgotten the whole thing. But no, not us. We had to make a point. So, we repeated the same, unwarranted or so we thought. Shunning played out 3 more times. On the 4th try, we made it in. We were sneaky about it and really thought we'd pulled off something impressive. Here's what we did. There were a group of dapper, I heard that term outside the club one night and I like how it sounds, elder goths outside the club, and Gender, thinking himself quite dapper, decided we would insert ourselves into their little circle and see if we could get in. Pretty cool, huh? While the doorman was distracted, we slipped in and were bowled over by what we saw. The foyer was small, but perfectly creepy. The torch-lined walls were lit with fake lights that looked real and were painted black. The carpet was blood red, and on each wall was a gigantic gargoyle standing guard. Ahead of us was a purple curtain-bedecked opening, and we stepped confidently through to the club. I have to admit, while really neat-looking, I was a little disappointed in how small the inside was. On one wall was a bar with 2 bartenders, but a really limited selection of drinks. There was a large dance floor, some antique red velvet couches, and some black draped candlelit tables. The walls were lined with grotesque Gothic paintings, and chandeliers hung in random places around the room. An ornate iron staircase led upstairs, where there was another tiny bar with 1 bartender, a tiny dance floor, and more couches. Gender grabbed my arm. We made it! I'm going to scope around and see who we can mess with. You hit the bar and start our scenario. I'll keep an eye on you and be back soon. And with that, he was gone. I took a breath, scanned my surroundings, and then I saw them. A small, beautiful group sitting at the bar, so I made my way over. Trying not to be too conspicuous, I checked out the group as I walked over and seated myself. There were 3 of them. The oldest man was very handsome, wearing a top hat, tuxedo with tails, and carrying a beautiful cane. I caught a glimpse of red contacts. The younger man was dressed in what I call industrial pants, with studs and other hardware, fishnet shirt, black nails, and a samurai-style hairdo. The woman was beautiful and elegant in a black and white striped dress pantsuit and black granny boots with white spats. Perched jauntily on her head was a small black funeral-type hat with a skull pin with rubies for eyes. I caught a glimpse of black contact lenses. "Hello." I turned. It was the older of the two men who'd spoken. "Evening," I returned. I still wasn't impressed. Small dance floors, nothing decent to drink, and though it might sound arrogant, Gender and I looked as good as these people. "Come here often?" I bowed my head, first time. It was then that I felt a cold hand on the back of my neck. I was caught completely off guard but didn't break character, lightly slapping the hand, which belonged to the older man, away. "Manners, sir. No touching without the permission of my owner." The woman spoke, her voice husky and creepy. "And where is your owner, dear?" "Orla!" Gender to the rescue. I turned around, stepped off the stool, and curtsied, my head and eyes low. I felt that something wasn't right, but I was determined to hold my own. Things were about to get good. "Making friends, are we?" "Yes, sire. I wish to appear sociable so as not to cause you embarrassment." Gender sneered and grabbed hard. He was such a good actor. "And what makes you think you know how to do anything that would please me, or what I deem acceptable?" I curtsied again. "I can only hope that I am fortunate enough to please you in any way, sire." I snuck a glance at our audience and got that feeling again. They were smirking. Why were they smirking? They were supposed to be aghast, disgusted, uncomfortable. That was our favorite reaction. And here they were, smirking. I looked at Gender, curtsied for no reason, and bowed my head. That was our special cue to step it up, and he did, but not in a way I expected. Once again, jerking me hard by the arm, he spat, "I think you've had enough socializing for the evening." With that, he hauled me out of the club. Once outside, his demeanor changed. "Orla," he hissed, "I'm glad we're out of there. There's something off about that place." I had to agree. Things hadn't gone exactly as we had anticipated, but I had a feeling Gender had more to share. "What do you mean?" "You know how most clubs are loud with lots going on?" "Yeah." "Well, this place, all everyone did was glare at me like I didn't belong there, whispering and glaring at me. I didn't expect people to be friendly, but every person I saw was hostile. I wasn't expecting that. I tried to play out our scenario, but I had to get us out of there." I agreed. Probably best we never go back there. We wanted to go in, we got in, we saw the place. But I don't want to go back. Gender nodded. That was when we heard it. Laughter, low and distant at first, and then all around us. We quickened our pace and started all but running. Suddenly, we ran into a wall. At least, that's what it felt like. We fell back onto the ground, and when we looked up, we were greeted by the sinister snarls of the 3 bar patrons from the club. The older man spoke. "Did you not think we knew what you were from the moment we saw you? You had no business in our club." Gender audibly swallowed. "Your club?" They all 3 grinned at us, and that was when we saw it. Their teeth. Long, sharp, and white. It was then that I also noticed the eye color of the 2 vampires I had admired earlier were not contacts. That was the last thing either of us remembered before we woke up in the cemetery, in an old broken-down mausoleum. The cemetery we'd once loved so much, we now hate. It's where we live, of course neither of us able to go home. No mall either. But what we do have is Starlight, that stupid club where we can be found every night of the rest of our wretched existence because it's the only place we are with our own and feel safe. We now hunt the living we used to make fun of. We feed. We're murderers, eternal teenage serial killers. Be careful what you wish for. All Gender and I wanted was to belong someplace unique. We got our wish, but not how or the way we wanted. All right, weirdos, and thank you for sticking around for all 5 vampire stories. I'm here right now for my special author chat with author Kasey Hill. Hi, how are you doing today, Kasey?
I am perfect today. It is the first day of school, so it is silence in the house.
Oh, wow. The sound of silence. Gotta love it.
Yes, my favorite song too. What do you know?
But I kind of do love that your kids just came right in and went ahead and made themselves co-stars of the one episode where they were home from summer school. I love that. I did.
Yeah,
I edited out some of it, but I should have just kept them in because they're a stitch.
like everyone in this house has to be a star in my life. Like honestly, like Alvin will take my phone when I'm not looking and post statuses up on Facebook, and like people love it. People go crazy for it. They're
Girl,
like,
I
"When's he
have
gonna post
seen
it next?"
those, and we are not going to talk about those because we have had enough mature material so far on this episode. But you guys are too funny. So, oh boy, we had five stories, and now we're going to have some poetry. And why do you think, like, as soon as I even mentioned vampires, everyone was on board? Why do you think vampires are so enduring after all these years? I was kind of surprised.
I honestly don't know. I think it might be the variety of stories, the different spins people put on them.
That's
Here,
true, because you can't just do the same old Dracula story anymore. So that's true.
like 5 years ago, I participated in one of the verses anthologies that was out through JEA, and it was the Vamps versus Wolves, and of course, I was a vamp,
Right.
and I put that's my number one read story on Amazon, Gang Bang the Vampires.
Well, I mean, it touches on all the elements there. What more could you ask for? Um, so you've got a trilogy. Is it? Do you consider the 3 poems in your set that you sent me a kind of a trilogy of poems?
It actually is a trilogy of poems. It comes from my poetry book, Angels on the Moon, and it starts off with a fallen angel, and the angel becomes mortal, and then she's seeking immortality, so she becomes a vampire.
Cool. When did that book come out?
I have no idea.
Yeah, you've got so many titles because I keep saying I've read so much of your short work. I keep saying I need to pick a book and sit down with it, but how can I pick one when you've got so many? Anyway, do you want to read one of those for us and we'll kind of break them up and talk in between, like maybe read just the first installment in that trilogy?
Sure. It is entitled The Vampire's Prayer of Death.
Ooh.
The blood pools around me in crimson shades of bliss. The knife shredded the skin. I offer a token of a simple kiss. I plunge my hand in, cutting my knuckles and wrist. I grab the heart still beating. I yank and pry and twist. As they lie screaming in their own pool of blood, a heart is what I need. I breathe in the smell of copper. I taste the life essence on my fingers, so bittersweet. I smile as they gasp their final breath. They gurgle as the blood chokes their airway. I place the treasure on my offering plate. It still beats. It still offers life. I walk to the bubbling cauldron and lift the plate high above. I taste a piece of it, savory and lustful. I toss the remnant of life into the heated liquid, a puff of smoke released. Lightning and thunder fill the sky. A bolt strikes the pot as I slice my hand, offering my own essence to mingle. The potion is done. What is left and dried away, I lift in a ladle to my lips, breathe in and drink.
So that maybe it's just because you were just talking about Snow White on Facebook, but is that a whole beating heart that they're eating in
Yes.
that? I
Yes.
like that.
And
That's very evil queen.
yes, it's a witchcraft spell. So she's using a spell to create herself into a vampire.
I just always love the aesthetic of a heart beating outside of the body that it previously occupied. Like no matter what setting you put that in, I'm a sucker for it. It probably goes back to like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, like the Kali Ma, and he, rips his heart out. That was the best.
Right, right.
I was so little when I saw that. That might have been the most edgy thing I'd ever seen. I was like, wow, I want to rip a heart out of a chest. And clearly you do too.
We can't have you running around ripping out hearts now.
We all do a little bit. Do you want to give us part number 2?
Yes.
Okay.
The liquid slid down my throat, searing and cold all the same. I tip the ladle to its last drop. It flows into my mouth and down my throat. I smile a bloodlust grin. I close my eyes and lift my head upwards. The warmth rushes through my body. I'm jerked to my knees as a cold, icy grip replaces the warmth. I feel my body contort. Agony befalls me. The icy grip of death flows through my veins. I can hear the heartbeat of the one I offered beat alongside of mine. Mine slows as the other grows in intensity and rapidness. I clutch at my chest, tearing my dress open, my breast revealed only to the moonlight. The rise and fall of each tormented breath, the beat of my heart nearly bursting through my cavity. Each double thump, I can see it imprinting my skin. I fall to the ground and convulse. My skin turns blue from the pale, lifeless look it once had. I gasp and gasp, each breath burning my lungs. No oxygen, a fish out of water. I can only think now as death descends.
Man, I felt that when she ripped open, because like they always do that. Luckily, I've never personally experienced it, but on movies and shows when they can't breathe, you can't breathe so much and you're dying. You think, well, maybe I'll just rip off all this clothes and it'll help. And no, she's dead. But is she?
Right,
Is she?
right.
Because it's a vampire trilogy, so I suspect she probably ain't dead, huh? Well, you know what? I'm not going to keep you hanging on part 3 and keep your nerves on edge. And I kind of want to know how it ends. So let's just finish it out. I want to hear the rest.
Hell of fateful slumber of change, winter's barren lands of waste. Death be quickened on thy heels as I lay in bed in twilight's grace. Awakened in the blood of fire, death forgive my forging power. Changing thought and will perceived, guiding darkness through womb conceived. Light is dawning as I breach, and immortal death is close in reach. Fateful hour drawing near, rotting soul inside with fear. Resting peaceful in the stars above, descends the death of change and love. Faster thoughts and piercing flesh, ever comes the prayer of death.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
I was so lost in that I was going to say something and I just started listening. And, it really speaks to your writing. And I thank you for coming on here and sharing that because, the stories I read, I get to stop and start when I please. And I'm not live. And I know that can be a little nerve-wracking. So thanks. Those were great.
Of course.
Is it nerve-rattling, nerve-wracking? Because over the years, I know it's nerve-wracking. I've got you. But over the years, I say nerve-rattling. And I wonder if anyone's ever caught me on that. But nerves get rattled, you know.
Yes, rattle the nerves.
Yeah. But you did great. Have you ever done any other kind of live readings?
Um, Not very often. I used to be in the horror authors carnival where every week we went live, and sometimes we read what we had written, like an excerpt of something. I once did a live write verbal with a co-host at the time, my friend T.S. Willard. Instead of like back in like 2016 through like 2018, live writes were like a really big hit in the writing community, where they'd give you a picture to write from, and you took turns making a story on
So
the spot for
it's a
it.
photo prompt, but completely live. Okay.
Yes, and you take turns and you read what they write, so you can write what you need to write. Well, we did one verbal. And I'm not a very good talker on the
Freestyler.
spot.
Yeah.
Like, I can type my fingers off because I can think inside my head when I'm typing, and I can type really, really fast. But like thinking and speaking at the same time is not my forte at all.
I feel that. And I'm starting to get out there with the conventions, and I got an email, looking for who wants to be involved in panels or who might want to do live readings. And I decided I'm just not ready yet. I think I'm going to go, since I've never really done the convention scene before, other than as a fan. I've been to a ton on that side, I've always been a fangirl. But since I've never done the conventions, and I do kind of have anxiety. Okay, I have a lot of anxiety. I'm not going to play it down. But I think I'm just gonna spectate and kind of watch what goes on. But I would like to work my way up to that at some point in my writing career. Maybe stand up and read something or be on a panel. It looks fun.
Yeah, it does look fun, but like as long as it's already pre-written, it's good for me.
Right. Well, even with that, oh Lord, even when I have plenty of time, I still fudge it up because my awful cough that made it through the last vampire episode, that horrified me. I had that episode released for hours, and I was kind of waiting to sit down and listen to it with my husband. I had listened to all the segments of it before I put it together and put it up, and I thought it was fine. And I'm sitting there and we're listening to it together. And here's this, I started kind of getting short of breath. And then here's this cough. And I said, oh my God, I thought I edited that out. But luckily, other than the people who went and snagged a download right away, luckily I was able to go in and edit that and re-upload it for Spotify and YouTube and everything. And there's very few people who have that cough. And it could be worth money someday if I get famous.
I totally get it. Like you heard in the first poem that I read, how I stumbled at the end on words. I get tongue tied very easily.
Because it's like, when do you breathe? When are you supposed to breathe during something of that nature?
Right. And like I get tongue tied very easily, and normally like when I get tongue tied, I'm like and then reset myself. But you can't do that when you're reading a poem.
That is the sound of you resetting yourself. I like that. Yeah, so what are you going to do with your time now that your kiddos are back in school?
Pretty much what I always do. Write, read, do submissions, the whole shebang. Watch TV in peace.
I somehow knew you'd say those things, but in my head, anytime someone says, what should we do? I always do the pinky in the brain. Try to take over the world.
Well, that's what I'm doing. Doing all that though, I'm taking over the world.
One book at a time.
One book at a time.
Yes, or in my case, one story at a time, because we all know I have a terrible addiction to short stories.
Girl, preach. Lately, it's all I've been able to write. I opened up one of my stories for the series that needs to be finished. And the last time I wrote on the story was back in January, and I blew my characters up because, they literally blew up and changed into something else as part of their transition. And I think my friend, who is one of my beta readers, she told me that the characters are mad at me for blowing them up. And I really believe that they are.
They have a life of their own. They do, because I believe, what is schizophrenia or any other personality disorder? Those personalities have life. They're given life. They're created in the brain. And so I sometimes feel like when an author says the character changed the direction of my story because that's not where they wanted it to go, and people kind of laugh and giggle, they're being serious, because once you develop that character, that's who they are, and they've got to act accordingly to who they are,
Oh, I know. Like, I had one character in this series that was supposed to be, from beginning to end, a a villain. And I had started writing the series in like the end of 2015, and then started on book 2 in 2016. That's when I created this character. And then someone gave me horrible advice about not finishing writing a series until people are interested in your series. So I didn't finish it then. So 4 years later, this character popped up in my head like, hey, that's not me no more. I've
Right.
changed, okay?
Right. Yes, I've definitely experienced that. I've had things sit on the back burner for so long that I'm just a different person. So it's an interesting part of writing, how we grow and change with it. And I'll go back and read some of my earlier work, and, I'll still think it's good, or, well, sometimes I think it's bad, but um, it's just different than how I think now. I've just changed as a person. I'm 40 years old. I have a lot of wisdom, and I've been through a lot of shit. How about you?
Same, same. And honestly though, if you're not growing in your writing, are you really growing as an author?
Right. Well, what's funny about the vampire episodes is, aside from one very short poem, I didn't have anything on the vampire episodes. I just didn't really have the time to write something new, and my older stuff was kind of too long. I did have a vampire story I really liked, but it had a twist ending where it's not just vampires. So. And of course, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell you, we pay for, I don't know if the audience can hear this, but I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know. We pay for a lawn service once a week, and I need to be on this podcast for about half an hour once every couple weeks, right? And so when do they come? When do they choose to come? They will not give me a scheduled time. They will not give me a scheduled time. But if I put on this headset and I start talking to you guys, they will be right outside my window. So if you hear it, I'm doing my best over here. I really am.
Honestly, I thought I was hearing things.
See, I knew it. I feel like they are insanely loud. Oh my gosh.
I took off my headphones to see if it was an airplane passing over.
Me and other podcasters seem to have this in common. I've seen it on other things. It's like if you're trying to YouTube or you're trying to podcast, that's when something really loud will happen right outside the house. So I guess, that's just the way of the universe. Yeah. I don't have a big solid belief system, but I do believe in chaos. And I believe in almost a chaos that you can predict, though. Because, like I said, what can happen will happen. It's kind of life. This is why I'm not a philosopher, though. None of that was useful. None. Not a scrap of it. But what I'm good at is talking about vampires. And, gosh, I had so much fun with this episode. I messaged Michael Errol Swaim, and I said, why did you send me this story where I have to do all these country accents and all these voices? Because I kept having to turn off the microphone and just laugh because, like, I don't want to be offensive. Like, you're from Virginia. I don't want you to listen to the story and open up a can of whoop ass on me. So, but the characters are extra, they're characters. That's their point, to entertain us. So I was trying to have fun with it, but not be too ridiculous. So I hope everyone likes it when they hear it. It's it was a pretty fun one. And then Josh Darling messaged me about his story, and he said, thank you for letting him be a little bit blasphemous on here. So, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say, if anyone wants to send me a blasphemous story, go for it. The doors are open, especially if there's a vampire.
I was going to say, honestly, blasphemy goes hand in hand with vampirism, so.
Yes, it is at its very nature blasphemous. But you know what I always thought? I actually thought about writing a funny story or a funny poem for this episode with an atheist vampire. Because, you use a crucifix or some holy water or something, maybe on a Christian vampire. Well, what do you do to drive away an atheist vampire? Just like start preaching to him, or but no, that'd be in the same vein as the holy water or the crucifix. So what would be his downfall? I don't know. I guess that's why I didn't write it. I couldn't think of a funny spin on it. But do you ever see, think about it. Do you ever see a Jewish vampire and they're warding him off with maybe the Star of David or something? Or is it always just a crucifix? How boring,
I think that's one reason why vampire stories have evolved the way they have. Like, for instance, in the Vampire Diaries, they are not warded off by crucifixes. It's the same way in Twilight and everything like that. It's just part of the mythology from the medieval times, when it was very Christianized and everything. When, oh well, this person rose from the dead, they must be a vampire. It's like, no, you just buried an alive person that just seemed to be dead.
And that makes me think of the dinner scene in the movie Lost Boys. The mom character brings over a new boyfriend who her son, Corey Haim, thinks is the head vampire in town. And so he loads up this guy's food with all this shredded garlic, and the guy starts coughing on it. And he's like, what's the matter? You don't like garlic? And he's like, no, I love garlic. I just don't want a giant pile of it on my food. So it's funny when they put those little plays on the old mythologies, because at some point someone came up with the garlic thing. They thought that was a great idea, but honestly, why would a vampire be warded off with garlic?
I really enjoyed in Hotel Transylvania, where he's like, does a stake through a heart kill you? And Dracula's like, who wouldn't that kill? And I'm like sitting here like, you know what? He has a very good point there.
My son loves those movies. We always do there's a part where he's like, blah, 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 and he does it in the vampire.
I do not do blah, blah, blah.
Well, I literally had nothing in mind to talk about other than your poetry, but I could put my mic on mute while you read. You had a fourth poem, did you not?
Yes.
Well, we might as well read that, since the gardeners are outside my window, and I can go on mute for a minute while you do that. So I'm going to let Kasey Hill read us a fourth poem, guys.
This is The Mark of the Beast. The mist is dense as I step attentively in. My chest flutters, my shaking hand. I walk the path with no light of day, just the gray fog in sight drifting in from the bay. Panic arises as I feel a brush. A hand on my arm is the touch. A whirl from fear to look in the eyes. Fright and calm flutter through my heart wild. The hand is a claw from beast of the woods. Death is flooding my mind just as it should. I stare into the beast's dark eyes, and peace envelops my fear-stricken mind. Walk with me, it urges with no hate or malice. You will be safe with me, walking by your side. I can read your thoughts, and there is no God here. This place feeds from your strife and fears. But by my side you shall come to no harm. This is my kingdom, my never dying soul farm. Give me your hand, you will make it through alive. Quick, for your God has turned a blind eye. The chains of light are wrapped around you, they're constricting and suffocating you. For you chose the path of darkness and truth. Here you will learn what real gods can do. You will be my fledgling, I will show you the real light. But you must take my hand before the end of the night. Your soul will be bound to never move freely on. You will wither and die and be part of this soul farm. I bear no false witness, I provide only truth. Please take my hand, I'm begging you. The night's growing nigh, and soon daylight will consume. I cannot help you then, it's not under the night of the moon. Just as the light began to appear, I grabbed his hand as soon as it began to disappear. I closed my eyes tight and opened them up and was standing at the end of the path that I took. I looked down at my hand with confusion and panic. There was no other hand, no beast's paw. I peered closer at a small mark on top. The mark of the beast was where he grasped on. I hear a whisper floating through the air. The mark will protect you. It shall always be there. When you roam these paths and become bothered, tell them whose child you really are. They will grant you passage, for I'm always there. I will not abandon you like the other god of light and air. I am with you through light or dark. I am forever with you in your mind and heart. The beast is not forgotten once he leaves his mark.
All right. I am so glad you took over and read that because it got louder. They were like right outside the window while you're reading that. Um, but that was amazing. So in this one, it sounds like you've kind of intermingled like a demon figure with a vampire. Am I right?
Um, kind of, yes. It's more so like, I mean, the old and visionaries of vampires, they were, kind of claws. They were considered also to be beasts or creatures and everything like that. So,
You're an old soul.
and
You always draw from the older, folklore type stuff more so than the modern stuff, I feel like.
yes, I do. I like researching everything. Like everything I write, I research. There is nothing that I have written in fiction that I have not actually put research into
Girl,
to
you
look up
started researching
history.
what I was writing. I started talking to you about my true crime book I'm writing, and you were digging up stuff for it. I should bring you in on that because it'd be written by now instead of sitting there. Well, that's why your writing is so rich and so full of these visuals because you're filling your head with these visuals, doing all this research before you serve it up to us. So we appreciate that. Thank you for reading that.
You're welcome.
And, guys, audience, weirdos, listeners, isn't it just weird? I'm going to go back to the gardener thing because I just find things like that so weird because they have however many hours in the week. And I'm here with you and I'm here with Kasey for this half an hour. And we also got to share it with my lawn people. But hopefully it doesn't sound too bad and wasn't too loud out there. And I think it's been a pretty good chat. But I tell you what, I might be ready to move on to like Halloween. I'm all vampired out. And I think the next themed episode I do, other than our little chats and our regular episodes in between, I've been kind of thinking of cooking up a Halloween episode.
I would love a Halloween episode because, like Halloween is life.
Yes. That was the most genuine response. Like, that came from your heart.
It did. It did.
So, would you want to get in on the Halloween episode and write a story?
Oh, totally. I have one started that I could finish for you. Like,
Or if you have a reprint, like because I love reprints because I have been paying authors here and there for stories, but guys, I'm broke. So if you have a reprint you want to donate me for free, please do. Anyway, I interrupted, so you're kind of working on a Halloween story, so maybe you'll get back to it?
Yes, it's been on my list for years to finish. Like I started it in 2015. So,
What?
yeah.
I think you need to finish that. That pumpkin is ripe.
I am the ADHD writer. I will start something, and when it goes dry, I will start something new. And when that goes dry, I'll start something new. And then I'm like, I'll get back to that eventually. I promise. And here it is, like
Hey,
nearly a
but
decade later.
it must work out to some degree because, like I said, you've got a million books out there, so some of it is being completed somewhere along the way. So that's good.
Should be completed faster, but yes.
Well, you know, I I posted a big social media announcement one day and it said, I just wrote 1,000 words on my new novel. Now I just need to do that about 60 or 100 more times and I'll have a novel. And I've done it like one more time since then. Like,
You know what I do? I post covers. I'll make a cover, and I'm like, if I make a cover, I know I'll finish it.
no, just makes you look dumb. I'm kidding, but I am starting to feel silly, with the true crime book because I was all gung ho with announcing it, and then now I've backburnered it for other stuff. So I don't know. The burners get changed around, things get backburnered, then they get simmered for a while. It'll all cook up eventually, right?
Yep. Yep.
All right. Well, I'm going to, I guess, wrap this up because this is a really long episode, but I feel like people will stick with it to the end because it's also a really awesome and interesting episode, if I do say
Oh,
so
I
myself.
agree. I agree. It was very interesting.
All right. Well, I'm going to have you on in September and we're going to talk about whatever the heck we decide at that point. But for now, I'm going to have you say goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye, everybody.
Should I stop making my guests do that? Is that I feel like a teacher or like a boss at work that forces someone, like stand up and tell everyone about yourself or say goodbye or, you know, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't force people to be like, bye. What do you think? Next time, just come up
Um,
with something. Just next time that I tell you to say bye, just lay some really weird outro, okay? That's your assignment.
okay.
Instead of
Deuces.
bye, yeah. Well, that one's cool. That's kind of cool. But I said weird, so work on it. But anyway, I loved your poems, and thanks so much for coming on. And I'll talk to you next time.
Of course, anytime.